Nexus Prime, the jewel of the intergalactic confederation, stood as a beacon of peace and cooperation. The city's skyline glimmered with spires of light, and the streets buzzed with traders and diplomats from 1,000 worlds. Built atop the ancient crystalline structures of the Versation people, it was the epitome of unity and diversity, a city where star travelers and ground dwellers alike sought common ground. For millennia, the Confederation had maintained this peace through diplomacy and trade. But in the shadows of the Orion Nebula, a storm was brewing. The Xenotex Armada, a nomadic species known for their mastery of war, had emerged from their centuries-long slumber. Rumors of their conquests trickled in slowly at first. Planets stripped of resources, colonies left in ruins, and populations enslaved. When the Armada finally crossed the Confederation's borders, terror gripped every member world. In the Grand Council chamber of the Confederation Citadel, panic reigned supreme. Representatives from all 30 member worlds bickered over how to respond to the looming threat. The Versation diplomat Selena Voss, with her azure skin and silver hair, stood in the eye of the storm, attempting to restore order. The Xenotex demand the immediate surrender of Nexus Prime and the handover of all its resources, she stated, her voice calm but firm. In return, they promised to spare the rest of the Confederation. Lies, bellowed Tolax, the reptilian representative from the Zorkon Empire. They will ravage our worlds regardless. We must mobilize our fleets and meet them head-on. And risk annihilation, countered Daxos Vaylor of the Altaran Collective. They outnumber us 10-1, and their weaponry is far superior. We should abandon Nexus Prime and fortify our home systems. We cannot sacrifice Nexus Prime, Selena interrupted. It is the heart of the Confederation. If it falls, the rest will follow. How then do we defend it? Asked Niara Kern, the insectoid envoy from the Arcaran swarm. Our fleets are scattered, our allies hesitant. How can we hope to stand against the Xenotex Armada? The chamber fell silent as Selena weighed her words carefully. There is one option, she began. We can seek aid from the humans. The mention of humans sent a ripple of discomfort through the room. The Earthborn species had only recently joined the galactic stage, their rapid technological progress unsettling many older civilizations. Tales of human ferocity in battle had earned them a reputation as violent and unpredictable. Humans, scoffed Tolax, you would have us rely on those savages? They are unpredictable and reckless, added Daxos Vaylor. We cannot trust them. But they are also resourceful and tenacious, Selena insisted. Their ability to innovate under pressure is unmatched, and their military strategies are unparalleled. With their help, we can defend Nexus Prime. A murmur of dissent spread through the chamber. Some representatives argued that the humans would bring only chaos, while others feared that involving them would lead to further instability in the Confederation. But as the Xenotex threat loomed larger, Selena's proposal gained reluctant acceptance. The Council voted in favor of sending a delegation to Earth, and Selena was appointed to lead it. She knew it was a desperate gamble, but with the Confederation's unity fraying at the seams, it was the only chance they had. 2 days later, Selena stood on the bridge of the diplomatic ship Ambassador's Hope, orbiting above Earth. The blue-green orb of the planet shimmered below, framed by the vastness of space. The crew had established contact with the United Nations and the Earth Defense Alliance, and a meeting was arranged with General Marcus Sinclair in Berlin. The diplomatic shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, skimming over the European continent, before touching down at the U.S. Embassy. General Sinclair, a tall, imposing figure in his 50s, greeted the delegation with a stern nod. His gray hair was cropped short, and his blue eyes bore the weight of 1,000 battles. Welcome to Earth, he said, his voice steady. I understand you have a matter of urgency to discuss. Selena exchanged glances with her fellow diplomats before stepping forward. General Sinclair, the Intergalactic Confederation faces a grave threat. The Xenotex Armada is advancing on Nexus Prime as we speak. We seek your assistance in defending our city. Sinclair listened intently as Selena explained the situation in detail. His expression remained unreadable, but his eyes flickered with interest. "We've heard rumors of the xenotechs," he said finally. "But why should Earth get involved? The Confederation has kept us at arm's length for years." "I understand your hesitancy," Selena replied. "But the xenotechs are a threat to all life in the galaxy. If they conquer Nexus Prime, they won't stop there. They will eventually come for Earth as well." Sinclair studied her for a moment before nodding slowly. "I'll need to consult with my superiors, but I believe we can reach an agreement. However, our assistance comes with conditions." "Name them," Selena said. "We will have full control over the operation. Your forces will act only as observers and support personnel." Selena hesitated. "That will be a hard sell to the Council." "Then you'd better start selling it," Sinclair replied, "because that's the only way this works." After a tense pause, Selena nodded. "Agreed." Sinclair extended his hand. "Then let's get to work." Back on Nexus Prime, the sight of human soldiers disembarking from their dropships struck fear into the hearts of many. The humans moved with a disciplined precision, their armor gleaming and weapons bristling with lethality. Their commanding presence made even the most hardened Confederation soldiers uneasy. General Sinclair wasted no time establishing a command center deep within the citadel of Nexus Prime. He summoned his strategists and studied the Xenotech's armada's movements. It became clear that the enemy's superior technology would require unconventional tactics. The other Confederation members watched with growing trepidation as the humans meticulously prepared for war. Despite their terrifying reputation, it seemed that only the humans could save them from annihilation, and thus the shattered piece of the Confederation hung in the balance, with Nexus Prime at its center and humanity poised to defend it with every terrifying ounce of their ingenuity. Selena Voss stood at the window of her quarters aboard the Ambassador's Hope, staring at the Earth below. The planet's azure oceans and swirling clouds offered a stark contrast to the galactic turmoil she had left behind. She knew the decision to seek help from the humans had not been a popular one, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Now she had to convince the Confederation Council that humanity's ruthless methods were their only hope. The ship was quiet as it orbited Earth, waiting for General Sinclair's response. Selena couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at her. The humans had a reputation for being unpredictable and often brutal in their strategies. Would their alliance with the Earth Defense Alliance ensure the salvation of the Confederation, or would it simply invite chaos? The silence was broken by a knock at the door. It was Relin Varix, her second-in-command, his face etched with concern. "Selena, General Sinclair is ready to meet us," he said. Selena nodded and straightened her silver diplomat's cloak. "Very well, let's go." The U.S. Embassy in Berlin was a fortress of steel and glass, fortified by advanced security measures and guarded by stern-faced soldiers in black combat gear. Selena and her delegation were escorted through winding corridors to a conference room where General Sinclair awaited them. The room was stark and utilitarian, furnished with a long metal table and a wall-mounted display screen. Sinclair stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back as he watched the sky. Beside him was Colonel Elizabeth Hayes, the Earth Defense Alliance's chief strategist, and Major Diego Ramirez, commander of the ground forces. General Sinclair turned as Selena entered, offering a curt nod. "Welcome, Ambassador Voss. Please take a seat." Selena sat opposite Sinclair, with Relin and the other Versatian diplomats flanking her. "We have discussed your request for assistance," Sinclair began, his voice steady, "and we agree that the Xenotech's armada poses a significant threat to galactic stability." Selena exhaled in relief. "Then you will help us defend Nexus Prime?" "Yes," Sinclair confirmed, "but our involvement comes with strict conditions." He gestured to Colonel Hayes, who activated the display screen. A holographic projection of Nexus Prime appeared, surrounded by digital markers representing the Xenotech's fleet. "The Xenotech's armada has encircled Nexus Prime," Hayes explained, her tone clipped and efficient. "Their fleet consists of one mothership and several dozen warships, supported by hundreds of smaller fighters. We estimate their numbers to be at least 10 times our own," Major Ramirez added. "And their technology is significantly more advanced." Sinclair stepped forward, his gaze locked on Selena. "Our strategy will focus on asymmetrical warfare." Hit-and-run tactics, sabotage, misinformation, anything to disrupt their command structure and create confusion. We will also establish a fortified perimeter around Nexus Prime, Hayes continued, but our forces will remain under our direct control. The Confederation troops will support us as auxiliary units. Selena listened intently, understanding the implications. The humans would be in full command of the operation, and the Confederation soldiers would have to follow their orders. "And what about civilian casualties?" she asked. Sinclair's expression hardened. "We will do everything in our power to minimize them, but war is unpredictable. We will not hold back for the sake of collateral damage." The room fell silent. The Versation diplomats exchanged uneasy glances, but Selena knew there was no alternative. The Xenotech's armada would show no mercy, and hesitation would only lead to greater loss. "We accept your terms," she said finally. Sinclair extended his hand. "Then let's get to work." Back on Nexus Prime, preparations were already underway for the humans' arrival. The Citadel had been transformed into a bustling command center, with soldiers from dozens of worlds coordinating defensive strategies. But as the humans disembarked from their dropships, the atmosphere shifted. The human soldiers moved with a precision and discipline that was both impressive and unnerving. Their black combat armor, equipped with exoskeletal enhancements, gave them an imposing presence. Their weapons, sleek and bristling with advanced technology, seemed to hum with lethal intent. General Sinclair wasted no time in establishing his headquarters deep within the Citadel. Maps and schematics of Nexus Prime covered the walls, and rows of computers flickered with tactical data. Sinclair stood at the center, his commanding presence radiating authority. Colonel Hayes coordinated intelligence gathering, sending reconnaissance drones into the Xenotech's perimeter to map their movements. Major Ramirez drilled his ground troops in urban warfare, preparing them for the close-quarters combat that would ensue once the Xenotechs landed. Selena Voss and the other Confederation diplomats watched in stunned silence as the humans meticulously prepared for war. Their reputation for ruthless efficiency seemed well-earned. Meanwhile, the Xenotech's armada hovered in orbit, their ships forming a grim halo around Nexus Prime. The Xenotech's mothership, Iron Scythe, loomed largest among them, its jagged hull bristling with weaponry. Inside, War Chief Zarek Threx stood before a holotable, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "The humans have arrived," hissed his Lieutenant Skarn. "Our spies report that they have taken control of the Confederation's defenses." Threx's eyes narrowed. "Foolish creatures. They will only prolong their suffering." "What are your orders, War Chief?" Skarn asked. Threx surveyed the holographic projection of Nexus Prime, his gaze cold and calculating. "We will crush them utterly, send a raiding party to test their defenses, and prepare the fleet for a full assault." "As you command, War Chief." The next morning, alarms blared throughout Nexus Prime as a dozen Xenotech's raiding ships broke through the defensive perimeter. They streaked down into the city, their energy weapons scorching the skyline. General Sinclair was quick to respond. "Major Ramirez, deploy Alpha and Bravo squads to the eastern quadrant," he barked. "Colonel Hayes, scramble the air wing. I want those raiders neutralized." The human soldiers moved like clockwork. Alpha and Bravo squads advanced through the labyrinthine streets, picking off Xenotech's raiders with sniper rifles and grenade launchers. The air wing swooped down from above, unleashing precision missile strikes on the enemy ships. Within an hour, the raiders were neutralized, and the smoldering wreckage of their ships littered the streets. The humans had won the first skirmish, but General Sinclair knew this was just the beginning. The Xenotechs would return with greater force, and the true battle was yet to come. Selena Voss watched from the Citadel, her heart heavy with both hope and fear. The humans had proven their skill, but the road ahead was fraught with peril. The fate of Nexus Prime, and the entire Confederation, now rested in the hands of these terrifying humans. The Xenotech's raiding party had been neutralized, but Nexus Prime remained on edge. Smoke from the skirmish still drifted through the city's skyline, casting long shadows over the crystalline towers. Civilians stayed indoors, hiding in makeshift shelters, while soldiers patrolled the streets. The air was thick with tension. In the newly established command center, deep within the Citadel, General Marcus Sinclair and his Earth Defense Alliance strategists pored over tactical maps and live surveillance feeds. The room buzzed with urgent conversations and the clatter of keyboards. Sinclair stood at the center, his expression grim. "Colonel Hayes, what's the latest on the Xenotech's fleet movements?" he asked. Hayes, her fingers flying across her tablet, brought up a holographic projection of the enemy armada. "Satellite imagery indicates they're holding position for now, sir, but we've detected increased activity on their mothership." "They're preparing for a full assault," Major Diego Ramirez chimed in. "They won't let the failure of their raiding party stand." Sinclair nodded thoughtfully. "Then we need to hit them where it hurts." He turned to Selena Voss, who stood quietly by the wall, observing the humans at work. "Ambassador Voss, I need your assistance." Selena approached, her azure cloak trailing behind her. "Of course, General. What can I do?" "We need intelligence on the Xenotech's mothership," Sinclair said. "Its layout, vulnerabilities, command structure, anything that could help us gain the upper hand." Selena hesitated for a moment. "The Xenotechs are notoriously secretive. Very few have ever set foot on their ships, let alone gathered useful intelligence." "But not none," Sinclair pressed. "There must be someone among the Confederation who has dealt with them before." "There might be one person," Selena replied slowly. "His name is Raver Quinn, a former smuggler who did business with the Xenotechs before retiring to a remote asteroid. He might have information, but he's not easy to deal with." Sinclair's eyes lit up with a steely determination. "Find him and bring him here. Whatever he wants in exchange, we'll give it to him." While Selena arranged the search for Raver Quinn, Sinclair focused on disrupting the Xenotechs from within. He summoned Captain Lisa Nakamura, a brilliant hacker and leader of the covert ops unit known as the Shadow Squad. "Captain Nakamura, I want you and your team to infiltrate the Xenotech's mothership and hack into their communications network," Sinclair ordered. "We need to feed them false information to sow confusion and distrust." Nakamura nodded, her expression unwavering. "Consider it done, General." The Shadow Squad prepared swiftly, donning stealth suits and calibrating their hacking equipment. Their dropship, equipped with cloaking technology, departed silently into the night, bound for the Iron Scythe. On the Xenotech's mothership, War Chief Zarek Threx stood on the bridge, overseeing the preparations for the assault. The warriors moved with mechanical precision, their insectoid limbs clinking against the cold metal floor. "Skarn, report," Threx commanded, turning to his lieutenant. "The fleet is ready, War Chief," Skarn hissed. "We will crush the humans and their allies." "Good. Ensure the raiding squads are primed for the initial wave. I want the humans obliterated." Threx paced across the bridge, his mandibles clicking in agitation. He knew the humans would not surrender easily, but their defiance would only make their defeat more satisfying. Unbeknownst to him, the Shadow Squad had already infiltrated the ship. Captain Nakamura and her team moved through the dimly lit corridors like phantoms, disabling security systems and planting listening devices. In the central communications hub, Nakamura hacked into the Xenotech's network and began feeding false information through their channels. Reports of betrayal and mutiny spread like wildfire, causing confusion among the ranks. At the same time, Nakamura intercepted critical intelligence on the Xenotech's assault strategy and relayed it back to General Sinclair. Back on Nexus Prime, Sinclair studied the intercepted Xenotech's data with grim satisfaction. "They're planning a three-pronged assault on the city," he told Colonel Hayes. "One wave will hit the eastern quadrant, another the western, and the third will target the Citadel directly." Hayes frowned. "It sounds like a classic pincer maneuver. How do you want to counter it, sir?" "We'll play into their expectations," Sinclair replied. "Fortify the eastern and western quadrants, but keep the bulk of our forces hidden around the Citadel. When the Xenotechs close in, we'll ambush them from all sides." Hayes nodded. "Understood, sir. I'll start mobilizing the troops." The humans worked tirelessly to prepare the defenses. Snipers took up positions in the high-rise buildings, while demolition experts rigged explosives along key choke points. Fighter pilots prepared for aerial dogfights, their sleek ships bristling with weaponry. Meanwhile, Selena Voss returned with Raver Quinn in tow. The former smuggler was a rugged man with a scarred face and a sly grin. "Ah, General Sinclair," Quinn drawled as he was brought before the command center. "I hear you're looking for information on our mutual friends, the Xenotechs. If you can give us a way to disable their mothership, you'll be well compensated," Sinclair replied. Quinn rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Well, I do happen to know of a little design flaw in the Iron Scythe. Their primary power core is located beneath the command deck, and it's poorly shielded." "And how do we get to it?" Sinclair asked. "The ventilation shafts," Quinn said with a grin. "They're narrow, but your special ops could squeeze through." Sinclair turned to Major Ramirez. "Assemble a strike team. I want them on that mothership before dawn." As dawn broke over Nexus Prime, the Xenotech's fleet began their assault. Wave after wave of raiding ships descended upon the city, their energy weapons scorching the streets. The humans and Confederation defenders fought back fiercely, engaging the enemy in brutal urban warfare. Alpha and Bravo squads held the eastern quadrant, using sniper rifles and grenade launchers to pick off Xenotech's raiders from the rooftops. In the western quadrant, Major Ramirez led a counterattack, driving the enemy back with precision artillery strikes. Meanwhile, the Shadow Squad infiltrated the Iron Scythe, moving through the ventilation shafts towards the power core. Captain Nakamura and her team planted high-yield explosives around the core, setting the timers for a coordinated detonation. The Xenotechs, thrown into disarray by the false intelligence and relentless counterattacks, struggled to maintain their assault. War Chief Zarek Threx stood on the bridge of the Iron Scythe, his fury palpable. "Skarn, where are my raiders?" he snarled. "They're falling back, War Chief," Skarn replied. "The humans are too strong." Threx slammed his fist against the console. "Cowards, we will destroy them ourselves." But before he could issue the command, the Iron Scythe shook violently. The explosives planted by the Shadow Squad detonated, sending shockwaves through the mothership. The power core ruptured, triggering a chain reaction of explosions that tore through the command deck. Captain Nakamura and her team barely escaped before the Iron Scythe erupted into a blinding ball of fire. The Xenotech's mothership disintegrated in orbit, and the surviving raiders fled in panic. On the surface, General Sinclair watched the destruction unfold from the Citadel. "The storm has broken," he muttered to himself. "Now let's clean up the debris." The humans and Confederation forces swept through the streets, rounding up the remaining Xenotechs and securing the city. The terrifying humans had won the day, but Sinclair knew the war was far from over. In the aftermath, Selena Voss stood beside General Sinclair in the command center. The humans had proven their value, but the victory had come at a great cost. Buildings lay in ruins, and the bodies of soldiers and civilians alike littered the streets. "You've given us hope, General," she said quietly, "but I fear this is only the beginning." Sinclair nodded. "The Xenotechs will return, but we'll be ready for them." The humans had turned the tide of the conflict, but the storm was still brewing on the horizon. The fate of Nexus Prime and the entire Confederation would depend on their next move. The destruction of the Iron Scythe sowed panic throughout the Xenotech's ranks. In the absence of War Chief Zarek Threx, who perished in the explosion, the fleet devolved into chaos. Commanders barked conflicting orders, supply lines fell into disarray, and smaller ships deserted in droves. But even in disorganized retreat, the remaining Xenotech's forces held on to one goal: vengeance upon Nexus Prime. From his position in the Citadel's command center, General Marcus Sinclair studied the unfolding chaos with grim satisfaction. But he knew the reprieve would be brief. The remnants of the Xenotech's fleet regrouped around two secondary command ships, Blood Crescent and Voidblade. Both were heavily armed, and their commanders, Zarek and Vornak, were determined to avenge their fallen war chief. "Colonel Hayes, what's the latest on enemy movements?" Sinclair asked. Colonel Elizabeth Hayes, her face drawn and tired from sleepless nights, pointed to the display screen. "Zarek has taken command of the Blood Crescent and is rallying forces for an assault on the Citadel itself. Vornak is moving the Voidblade into position to launch simultaneous strikes on the eastern and western quadrants." Sinclair studied the map, tapping his fingers against the console. "We'll draw them into the city and use the terrain to our advantage. Major Ramirez, Ensure Alpha and Bravo squads are ready for guerrilla warfare. Every building, every street should be a battlefield. Major Diego Ramirez, his combat armor scarred from previous skirmishes, nodded curtly. Understood, sir. We'll turn Nexus Prime into a labyrinth. Colonel Hayes mobilized the air wing, Sinclair continued. We need to keep the Xenotech's fighters out of the skies and provide air support to our ground forces. Yes, sir, Hayes replied. And what about the civilian population? Evacuate them to the underground shelters, Sinclair ordered, and set up field hospitals near the Citadel. We'll need to treat the wounded as quickly as possible. Selena Voss, standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. General, how can I assist? Sinclair turned to her, his gaze unwavering. Your diplomatic team can help coordinate the evacuation and maintain morale. Make sure the shelters are well supplied and that every civilian knows where to go. Selena nodded resolutely. It will be done. As dawn broke over Nexus Prime, the Xenotech's assault began. From the bridge of the Blood Crescent, Commander Zarak observed the burning city below with cold determination. Prepare the raiding parties, Zarak hissed, and unleash the swarm. The Blood Crescent released a swarm of Xenotech's fighters, their sleek frames streaking through the sky like daggers. They engaged the Earth Defense Alliance air wing in a fierce dogfight, energy weapons blazing and missiles arcing through the air. On the ground, raiding parties descended upon the eastern and western quadrants, their energy blades slashing through the thin morning mist. But the humans were ready. Alpha Squad, led by Captain Lisa Nakamura, held the eastern quadrant. They fortified buildings, set up sniper nests, and rigged explosive traps along key choke points. As the Xenotechs advanced, they were met with a hail of sniper fire and grenade launcher explosions. Nakamura's soldiers moved swiftly through the maze-like streets, picking off raiders from the rooftops. Meanwhile, Bravo Squad, under Major Ramirez, defended the western quadrant. They set up barricades and fortified the high-rise buildings, using rocket launchers and machine guns to hold back the Xenotech's waves. Ramirez himself led the counterattack, coordinating with Colonel Hayes's air wing for precision airstrikes that decimated the enemy ranks. In the skies, Colonel Hayes directed the air wing with surgical precision. Human fighters weaved through the Xenotech swarm, using EMP missiles to disable enemy ships, before finishing them off with rapid-fire cannons. The Blood Crescent shuddered under repeated missile strikes, its hull scorched and buckling, but Commander Zarak was relentless. Deploy the heavy artillery, he snarled. I want that citadel reduced to ash. Massive artillery cannons emerged from the Blood Crescent, unleashing a devastating barrage upon Nexus Prime. Buildings crumbled under the onslaught, and the streets were reduced to rubble. But the citadel remained standing, its shields absorbing the worst of the impact. General Sinclair watched the devastation unfold from the command center. Major Ramirez, is Delta Squad ready? Yes, sir, Ramirez replied. They're awaiting your orders. Deploy them to the Blood Crescent, Sinclair ordered. It's time to take out Zarak. Delta Squad, a team of elite commandos, launched from the Citadel in a dropship, their mission clear: infiltrate the Blood Crescent and neutralize Commander Zarak. Led by Captain Ryan Cortez, the squad landed on the Xenotech's command ship and cut their way through the outer hull. Inside, they moved swiftly and silently, taking out guards with silenced rifles and plasma blades. Cortez hacked into the ship's security system, opening the path to the command deck. Let's move, he whispered, leading the squad down a narrow corridor. The command deck was a hive of activity, with Xenotech's officers barking orders and monitoring the battlefield below. Zarak stood at the center, his eyes glowing with fury. Cortez signaled to his team, and they struck with brutal efficiency. Grenades exploded, smoke filled the air, and plasma blades slashed through the Xenotech's officers. Within minutes, the deck was littered with bodies. Zarak roared in anger and lunged at Cortez with an energy sword. But the captain was ready. He sidestepped the strike and plunged his plasma blade into Zarak's chest, twisting it with a grim smile. The Xenotech's commander's body crumpled to the floor, and the Blood Crescent was thrown into chaos. Detonate the charges, Cortez ordered. Delta Squad retreated to the dropship as the explosives they had planted detonated, ripping through the Blood Crescent's core. The command ship exploded in a blinding ball of fire, and the remnants of the Xenotech's fleet fled in disarray. Back on the ground, the destruction of the Blood Crescent sent shockwaves through the Xenotech's raiders. Major Ramirez led the final counterattack, driving the enemy out of the eastern and western quadrants. The streets of Nexus Prime were littered with the bodies of fallen raiders, their energy blades still glowing dimly in the morning light. Selena Voss and her diplomatic team moved swiftly through the rubble, helping the wounded and evacuating civilians to the shelters. The humans had won the day, but the city lay in ruins. General Sinclair stood at the gates of the Citadel, watching the Xenotech's fleet retreat into deep space. Colonel Hayes approached, her expression grim. "The Void Blade has escaped," she reported. "Commander Vornak is regrouping the fleet near the asteroid belt." Sinclair nodded thoughtfully. "We'll deal with them soon enough." He turned to Selena, who was overseeing the field hospitals nearby. "Ambassador Voss, Nexus Prime is secure, but we need to rebuild quickly. The Xenotechs will return, and we must be ready." Selena approached, her face weary but resolute. "You've given us hope, General, but the cost has been high." Sinclair glanced at the smoldering ruins of the city. "War always exacts a heavy toll, but humanity stands with you, Ambassador. Together, we will prevail." As the sun set over the shattered skyline of Nexus Prime, the humans and the Confederation soldiers stood united in the grim realization that the true battle was yet to come. The clash of titans had only begun. Nexus Prime still smoldered as dusk fell over the battered city. The Xenotech's fleet had retreated, but their shadow lingered, a dark promise that they would return. General Marcus Sinclair knew that the next battle would be decisive. He had secured a tenuous victory, but with the Void Blade still intact and Commander Vornak regrouping his forces in the asteroid belt, he couldn't afford to rest. In the command center, the atmosphere was tense as Sinclair and his team analyzed the latest intelligence reports. Holographic projections of the Xenotech's fleet hovered above the conference table, with the Void Blade at its center. Major Diego Ramirez, Colonel Elizabeth Hayes, and Captain Lisa Nakamura stood by Sinclair's side, their faces set in grim determination. "The Xenotechs are regrouping near the asteroid belt," Nakamura reported, highlighting several clusters of enemy ships on the holographic display. "Vornak has fortified his position with defensive turrets and minefields. And he's rallying the remaining ships," Hayes added. "We're looking at a force of about 50 warships, not counting the smaller raiding vessels." Sinclair studied the display, his eyes narrowing. "And the Void Blade itself?" "It's heavily fortified," Ramirez said. "Their shields are at full capacity, and their weaponry is formidable." Selena Voss stepped forward, her azure cloak swirling around her. "General, do you have a plan?" Sinclair nodded, his expression resolute. "We can't afford to let the Void Blade continue as a rallying point. If we take down Vornak, the Xenotech's forces will crumble." He turned to Nakamura. "Captain, I want you to lead a team to disable the Void Blade's shields. Plant charges at key points and get out before they detonate." Nakamura nodded curtly. "Consider it done." "Major Ramirez, you'll lead Alpha and Bravo squads in a frontal assault on the asteroid belt. I want those defensive turrets neutralized and the minefields cleared." "Understood, sir," Ramirez replied. "Colonel Hayes, once the charges are set and the Void Blade's shields are down, you and your air wing will launch an all-out assault. Take out as many warships as you can." Hayes's eyes gleamed with determination. "We'll light them up, sir." Sinclair turned to Selena. "Ambassador Voss, your team will coordinate the evacuation of Nexus Prime. If things go south, we need to make sure the civilians can get to safety." Selena placed a reassuring hand on Sinclair's arm. "We'll handle it." With their plan in place, Sinclair looked around at his team. "All right, people, this is it. We take down Vornak, or we lose everything." Captain Lisa Nakamura and her Shadow Squad boarded their stealth dropship under the cover of night. The sleek, black vessel slipped through the darkness, cloaked from the sensors of the Xenotech's fleet. As the asteroid belt came into view, Nakamura peered through her scope at the looming form of the Void Blade. "Shadow 1 to Shadow Squad, prepare for insertion," she whispered into her comm. The dropship latched onto the hull of the Void Blade, and Nakamura led her team through the maintenance hatch. They moved silently through the corridors, avoiding patrols and security cameras, until they reached the first shield generator. "Set the charges," Nakamura ordered. Sergeant Davis placed high-yield explosives around the generator, and the squad moved on to the next target. One by one, they planted charges at critical points throughout the ship. But as they approached the final generator, an alarm blared through the corridors. "Security breach! Intruders on Deck 5!" a Xenotech's guard bellowed. Nakamura cursed under her breath. "Shadow Squad, engage!" The corridors erupted in plasma fire as the Shadow Squad fought their way to the final generator. They planted the charges, then made a hasty retreat to their dropship, leaving a trail of scorched Xenotech's bodies in their wake. "Shadow 1 to command, charges are set. Pulling out now." "Roger that, Shadow 1, Sinclair replied. "Air Wing, you're up." Colonel Hayes's air wing soared through the asteroid belt, weaving between the rocks as they closed in on the Void Blade. The Xenotech's defensive turrets opened fire, but Major Ramirez's squads had already cleared a path, taking out the turrets with precision rocket strikes. Hayes gripped the controls of her fighter tightly. "All units, commence attack." As the Void Blade's shields flickered and collapsed from Nakamura's charges, the air wing launched a devastating missile barrage. Explosions rippled across the ship's hull, tearing through the armor plating and disabling the weapon systems. Inside the command deck of the Void Blade, Commander Vornak snarled in fury. "Return fire! Crush these humans!" But the Xenotech's response was disorganized and ineffective. The air wing pressed the assault, targeting the remaining warships with surgical precision. One by one, the enemy ships erupted in flames, leaving the Void Blade exposed and alone. In the Citadel Command Center, General Sinclair watched the battle unfold on the display screen. "Major Ramirez, prepare for boarding." Alpha and Bravo squads boarded their dropships and descended upon the Void Blade like a swarm. They breached the hull and stormed the command deck, plasma rifles blazing. The Xenotech's guards fought fiercely, but were no match for the humans' ruthless efficiency. Ramirez led the charge, cutting through the defenders with his plasma blade. He reached the command deck to find Commander Vornak, energy sword in hand, bellowing orders. "You humans are weak," Vornak snarled, swinging his blade at Ramirez. But Ramirez ducked under the strike and lunged forward, driving his plasma blade into Vornak's abdomen. The Xenotech's commander let out a strangled roar before crumpling to the floor. "Secure the deck," Ramirez ordered. "Get those charges in place." The squads planted explosives around the command deck and retreated to their dropships just as the Void Blade erupted into a ball of fire, illuminating the asteroid belt in a blinding flash. The remaining Xenotech ships scattered and fled into deep space, their morale shattered. Back on Nexus Prime, Selena Voss oversaw the evacuation efforts, ensuring that civilians reached the underground shelters safely. When the news of the Void Blade's destruction reached her, she breathed a sigh of relief. General Sinclair stood at the gates of the Citadel, watching the Xenotech ships disappear over the horizon. Colonel Hayes approached, her face lined with exhaustion but lit with triumph. "They're running, sir," she said. Sinclair nodded. "The final blow has been struck." He turned to Major Ramirez, Captain Nakamura, and the rest of the team. "You did good work out there." Ramirez wiped the sweat from his brow. "We couldn't have done it without everyone pulling together, sir." The Citadel was filled with cheers and applause as the news of the victory spread. The terrifying humans had brought the Xenotechs to their knees and saved Nexus Prime from annihilation. But as the celebrations continued, Selena Voss stood quietly by the window, staring out at the ruins of the city. The cost had been great, and she knew that the road to recovery would be long. General Sinclair approached her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Ambassador, we won today, but there's still much work to be done." Selena nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. "You've given us hope, General. For that, we are grateful." The humans had delivered the final blow, but the fragile peace of the Confederation would require constant vigilance. Sinclair knew that the Xenotech's threat was not entirely gone, but humanity had proven themselves worthy allies. As the sun set over the battered skyline of Nexus Prime, Sinclair looked to the horizon with steely determination. He knew that the terrifying humans would always be ready to defend the galaxy, no matter the cost. Nexus Prime stood in ruins, but the fires of war had subsided. The Xenotech's fleet was in disarray, fleeing into deep space, leaderless and broken. The victory came at a heavy price. The city had been scorched, buildings reduced to rubble, and countless lives lost. Yet, amid the devastation, a new resolve emerged, a determination to rebuild and strengthen the intergalactic confederation. The Confederation Council reconvened in the half-destroyed citadel, surrounded by makeshift barricades and sandbags. Representatives from every member world sat around the circular table, their faces grim and weary. General Marcus Sinclair, dressed in his battle-worn uniform, stood at the head of the table, his gaze unwavering. Selena Voss sat beside him, her azure skin now marred with bruises and grime, yet her spirit unbroken. Sinclair cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Xenotech's threat has been neutralized for now, but this victory has come at a high cost. Nexus Prime lies in ruins, and thousands of lives have been lost." "Yet the Confederation still stands," Selena interjected, her voice steady. "We have proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, we can prevail. But we must remain vigilant." Tolax, the reptilian representative from the Zorkon Empire, hissed through his sharp teeth. "And what do you propose, Ambassador? The Xenotechs are still out there, regrouping." "We will not wait for them to strike again," Sinclair said. "The Earth Defense Alliance is willing to lead a joint task force to hunt down the remaining Xenotechs and dismantle their fleets." A murmur of concern spread through the council chamber. Daxos Valor of the Alteran Collective raised a cautious voice. "And what guarantees do we have that the humans won't simply seize control of our worlds in the process?" Sinclair met his gaze firmly. "We have no desire to conquer, but we will defend the Confederation with all our might. We propose the formation of an intergalactic defense coalition, led by the Earth Defense Alliance, but with representation from every member world." Niara Kern, the insectoid envoy from the Archeran swarm, clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. "And how will this coalition operate?" Selena leaned forward. "Each member world will contribute troops and resources to the coalition. The Earth Defense Alliance will lead strategic planning and coordinate operations. In return, we will ensure the protection of every member world." The council chamber fell silent as the representatives weighed their options. Finally, Tolax spoke up. "The Zorkon Empire supports this proposal. The humans have proven their worth." One by one, the other representatives voiced their support. The council voted unanimously to establish the Intergalactic Defense Coalition, with General Marcus Sinclair as its commander. Over the next weeks, Nexus Prime became a hive of activity as reconstruction efforts began in earnest. Human engineers worked side by side with Versation builders to restore the city's infrastructure. Troops from every corner of the Confederation gathered to fortify the defenses, while the new defense coalition mobilized to hunt down the remnants of the Xenotech's fleet. General Sinclair and Selena Voss walked through the citadel, surveying the progress. Soldiers saluted Sinclair as he passed, while civilians offered him words of gratitude. But despite the optimism, Sinclair couldn't ignore the wary glances that some Confederation members still cast in his direction. "You have given them hope," Selena said, sensing Sinclair's unease. "But they still fear us," Sinclair replied. "Fear is a natural reaction," Selena said gently. "But so is trust. It will take time for the Confederation to fully embrace the humans, but your actions will speak louder than their fears." They reached the command center, where Colonel Elizabeth Hayes, Major Diego Ramirez, and Captain Lisa Nakamura waited. "What's the status of the search operations?" Sinclair asked. Hayes tapped a display screen, bringing up a holographic projection of the galaxy. "The Blood Crescent remnants have been neutralized near the asteroid belt, and we've located several smaller Xenotechs raiding parties hiding in the outer rim." "Good," Sinclair said. "And the task force?" "Fully mobilized, sir," Ramirez reported. "We're ready to launch operations at a moment's notice." Sinclair nodded. "Excellent. Let's continue with the cleanup." A month later, the Citadel hosted a grand ceremony to commemorate the establishment of the Intergalactic Defense Coalition. The council chamber had been rebuilt, its walls gleaming with fresh crystal and banners from every member world. General Sinclair stood before the assembled representatives, his medals glinting in the light. Selena Voss stood beside him, her azure cloak billowing gently. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we stand united," Sinclair began. "The Xenotech's armada sought to divide and destroy us, but they underestimated our resolve. The Intergalactic Confederation has risen from the ashes, stronger and more united than ever." He gestured to the assembled representatives. "The Intergalactic Defense Coalition will ensure that no threat, no matter how great, will ever again endanger our peace." The chamber erupted in applause as Sinclair stepped aside for Selena Voss. "The humans have shown us that even in our darkest hour there is light," Selena said, her voice carrying through the hall. "They have proven themselves not as conquerors, but as allies and defenders." She raised her hand towards the banners overhead. "Today, we forge a new era of cooperation and unity, an era where we will face any threat together, as one confederation." The representatives stood as one, raising their hands in salute. The terrifying humans had come to the rescue, and their presence now symbolized hope and strength. As the ceremony concluded, Sinclair and Selena stood on the balcony of the Citadel, overlooking the partially rebuilt Nexus Prime. "Do you think the Confederation will hold together?" Selena asked quietly. Sinclair watched the workers below, lifting beams and stacking crates. "Unity is a fragile thing, but as long as we remember what we're fighting for, I believe we can build something lasting." Selena looked out at the skyline, the fires of war now replaced by the warm glow of reconstruction. "You've given us a new beginning, General. Let us make it a worthy one." Sinclair smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Together, Ambassador." And so the terrifying humans had come to the rescue, and from the shattered piece of Nexus Prime, the Intergalactic Confederation began to rebuild, with fragile hope guiding their way to a brighter future.